Good morning, Magic Players and card collectors of all kinds. Welcome back to the channel. If you saw yesterday's video with Kaiba in it, or the short, you will know that we had to bump our episode of this weekly series to today in order for me to film with Kaiba tomorrow's finale of Dollarama Draws of Destiny. So instead of getting this in yesterday, we are going to do it today by ourselves. Kaiba's not here with me because I just finished up work. And surprisingly, we actually got a decent amount of hours today. I think I ended up putting in just over 4, maybe even close to 4.5, which isn't bad. For once in a change, that's actually pretty good. So I won't complain about that. I guess there was some sort of error at my job where a whole bunch of our packages have been put on hold for some reason. So I'm not sure exactly why, but we have like 3 extra trailers of like packages that are full of or 3 extra trailers that are full of holds packages. So a bunch of extra work to do. So that was nice. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that, of course. We're here to do the deck. And so I have this lovely deck here today. And I'm pretty happy with this one. It's kind of a little bit of a weird one. It's kind of one of those ones where when you play it, everybody at the table is probably going to groan. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun to play. And for today, we're going to do Secret Commander. You'll notice that there are 2 sleeve cards here. The second sleeve card is a token that I will have to use a lot. So I just wanted to keep it in a sleeve because I'm going to have dice and other things sitting up on top of it. So I'm not going to reveal that token, and I'm not going to reveal the commander. There are a couple other tokens that we will be looking at as we get to the creature part eventually. Or I think they may actually be made without... one's made by a creature, one's made by a sorcery. That's what it was, yes. Anyways, so what we're going to do is we're just going to dive in. And as I said, we're going to play Secret Commander and see at what point you guys can guess which creature is in charge of this deck. It is a mono green deck. So I actually have 2 mono green decks, plus there is technically a third one that I built for Commander Core Creator Challenge. But I've since pulled apart a bunch of the pieces in that one to put into other decks that I wanted to upgrade or either build new decks. So that being said, I basically have 2 mono green decks. The one that we're going to look at today and the one that I've shown once before. I'm not sure if I've shown it in this series, but I definitely have shown it on the channel before. And when I finish upgrading that one, I will probably put it into this series as well. But in the meantime, in between time, let's check out the art on these forests. I was worried the sun might be an issue here. I'm hoping that I can just stay right in the perfect... Oh, that was my thumb that was giving me the shade. I wonder if there's a place that I can park around here that will not be so sunny. I'm just wondering if that's going to be too much when we get to cards that actually have text. I will briefly reveal one of the enchantments just to see. Yeah, I don't like that. That's a little bright, I think. Okay, I'm going to go move the car, and then we're going to resume this video. That was like the best timing ever. This school bus just pulled up and parked like just ahead of me, giving me the perfect spot for shade as long as that person stays there. So we're going to be on a bit of a time crunch now, but I'm going to get through this deck as quickly as possible. And I kind of want to do that anyways because, as I said, it's a lot later than it normally is on a Monday for me to get home. So Kaiba's probably losing his mind wondering where I am. So let's get on with it. We've got our artwork on our forests, and I'm just going to show them all off. A lot of them are similar. I tried to use like 4 or 5 repeating ones and then just make a bunch of get a bunch of copies of each of them. But I like the artwork on this one in particular. That one looks like a painting. I think it's pretty. And I'm kind of a big fan of that one too, actually. That one feels really good for this deck because this deck has like a very bitey kind of feeling to it, sort of like thing. Like painful. It's a painful deck to play against for sure. So every card in here is a forest with the exception of one. So I'm just going to speed this along a little bit. That is one of the rare different lands that I threw in. I really like that one though. It's a very nice autumn land. Very pretty. And Rogue's Passage would be that land that I'm talking about. I feel that having this in this deck is an essential part of making sure that this deck does what it wants to do. This deck is very combat oriented, so it's important for me to be able to actually deal battle damage to my opponent, and that's why adding a Rogue's Passage in here is ideal. It is not the only card in here that will let me hit my opponent, but it is one of the better ones, of course, for sure. So we'll put the lands back in the box, and we're just going to go in order from the top of the stack down. I think that's how I had it. Is that how I had it? Yes. Okay. Put that there so it tries to cover up so it doesn't spoil, because I think you guys can see that over on the side. Yes, you can. All right. We're going to do artifacts and enchantments first. You're going to notice that there's kind of a thick stack of these. And the reason why that is because there is a creature in this deck that is kind of like the... While we're playing Secret Commander and the commander is over here, you'll know that sometimes, every now and again, I have a card in my deck that's kind of like the backup commander or like the hidden commander of the deck, per se. And this one definitely has one of those. It's a very powerful creature, but it requires a lot of setup. And part of the setup that's required is definitely being able to give it an enchantment and an artifact. So, starting with the artifacts and enchantments, we've got a quarter shield. I love this one. I have several copies of this, and I think it's a very solid artifact. Getting it into play for free is amazing, and the ability to give your creature so much extra toughness plus vigilance allows you to be able to swing with it every turn and block with it as well, and chances are it will survive. The equip 3 is a little high, but it's worth it in my opinion for this card. So I definitely love running this if I have a deck that wants some toughness built into my deck. Viridian Longbow. I really like this one for this deck in particular because of the ability that this deck has. Basically, this is a really simple equip spell. Again, it has a little bit of a high equip cost with the equip 3, but it only costs 1 to put it into play. And the equip creature just taps to deal 1 damage to any target. As we get into the creatures, you're going to see exactly why that's so important. So for now, I'm going to kind of set that one aside and continue on. I've got the Soul Ring. I've put these in the order of like mana value, by the way, just so you know. It's not like in a particular power level value. There are a couple cards near the back, I think. Did I put them near the back? Maybe I didn't put them near the back. I did not put them near the back. Okay. Never mind. Oh, right. Those are sorceries that come up later. Never mind. You can tell that I'm very tired. Soul Ring, obviously a solid include into any deck that wants mana. This is one of those decks where you're definitely going to be removing my commander a lot. And while my commander is kind of cheap, if you remove it enough times, the commander tax will become an issue. So having the extra 2 mana just kicking about on a Soul Ring is pretty nice. Plus, it does help me get this deck going, which this deck does have kind of like an aggro aspect to it to a certain degree as well. So that is nice to have. We've got the Gorgon's Head. 1 to put it into play, 2 to equip, and the equipped creature gets Death Touch. I love Death Touch. It's one of my favorite mechanics in the game for sure. And if you can combine the quarter shield and the Gorgon's Head, that's really solid. Or not the, sorry. If you can combine the Gorgon's Head, I meant, and the Viridian Longbow, then when you tap, the damage that the creature will deal technically will apply the Death Touch, if I remember correctly. And so if you dealt it to a creature, you would kill that creature with 1 damage, which is insane. So that's at least how I understand the rule. Hopefully the rule hasn't changed, or I'm just not wrong about that, but that's the way I understand it anyways. I don't believe you have to actually deal combat damage to do death touch, as long as the creature does damage to something. Quick draw katana, 2 to put into play, 2 to equip. During your turn, the equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has first strike. So obviously, whatever creature you equip this to, you want to swing with each turn, and therefore it will be tapped, so you don't have to worry about the fact that it's going to lose the power up and the first strike on your opponent's turns. First strike also would be insanely good to combine with the Gorgon's Head, because then you've got first strike death touch, so automatically you're killing whatever and you don't take any damage unless that creature also has first strike or double strike, so pretty solid. Swiftfoot Boots, as I said, my commander is very valuable in this deck, so this is definitely going on him, or it could be going on that hidden commander that I talked about. That is also a potential target for this card for sure. There are a couple other cards that I might consider putting these on, but there's not too many. But the fact that the commander and the hidden card exist in this deck are enough that I definitely want to include this for those two particular. Next up, the Thran Power Suit. I love this card for sure. The equipped creature gets +1/+0 for every aura or equipment that's attached to it, and it gets also Ward 2. So as long as you stack up a bunch of the equipment here, or some of the enchantments that you're going to see in a bit, and then put this on, that creature's going to be well protected, and it's going to additionally have a whole bunch of extra power. For example, combining the Thran Power Suit and the Swiftfoot Boots on my commander would definitely give my commander a solid power boost and protect it really well from my opponent's effects. Belt of the Giant, or Belt of Giant Strength, sorry. 1 and a green to put into play. The equip cost is kind of insane, but this deck does have not a large amount, but there's enough of an ability to put on some +1/+1 counters and boost the power of some of my creatures that I could probably reduce the equip cost by about half almost. And I mean, giving base power and toughness 10/10 to, say, my commander, for example, would be phenomenal, or to the creature that I'm talking about in the deck that is hidden. So again, this is one of those cards that's specifically in here to help protect those two cards and give them a boost, or maybe something else. But yeah. Fire Shrieker, double strike, sure. Costs 3 to put into play, so it's a little more expensive than some of the other effects, but it only costs 2 to equip, so it's cheaper in the long run. And then first strike, as I said, is really solid, while double strike is even more solid, so especially combined with death touch, which is awesome. So good stuff going on there. Rancor, give the equipped creature +2/+0 and trample. If this gets put into the graveyard from the battlefield, this goes back to my hand, which is awesome, so I can keep giving creatures trample. And it's really cheap. Curse of Bounty is probably one of the meanest cards in this deck. But if you do this the right way, you can definitely make out like a bandit, per se. Whenever the enchanted player is attacked, untap all non-land permanents you control. Each opponent attacking that player untaps all non-land permanents they control as well. So basically, you want to target the player that is, if you're not the threat, which hopefully you can kind of hide the fact that you're going to be a threat at this table as much as you possibly can, which is not super well, but you can try. Anyways, you can target somebody else who's a threat and kind of try and direct the attention more at them if need be, hopefully. But what's really great about this is it lets you basically untap all your creatures after you swing with them. So like I said, this is more of a combat heavy deck. This will let me protect myself after I've full swung at somebody. Savage Silhouette, 2 and a green, enchant creature. Enchanted creature is +2/+2 and has pay 1 and a green to regenerate. Basically, my goal with this is to, again, put it on my commander or the hidden card or a couple of the other cards in this deck that I really want to protect so that I can keep bringing them back without fear if there's board wipes, things like that. Blanchwood Armor is always, in my opinion, an auto-include if you're going to play mono green, because you're going to have just so many forests, so it's just kind of silly not to. For the record, I don't remember 100%, but I think this deck has 35 lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yes. It used to have 32. When I did the deck upgrades the other day, I decided that I wanted to make sure that this deck could get off to the right start with regards to its aggro aspect a little bit more. So that's why I've added that in. Those extra lands in, per se. And, of course, 34 force is just a phenomenal amount of attack and defense to boost your creature by if you were able to somehow get all the lands out. Frantic Strength, just beautiful card because of the flash, in my opinion. Again, I want to give creatures trample in this deck. That is a positive thing to do, and I don't want to include something like, what's that card? Garruk's Uprising. Because there's not a lot of creatures in this deck that actually start out as above 4 in power. A lot of the creatures in this deck are actually like 1/1s, 2/1s, 1/2s, things like that. There are some powerful creatures, but not enough that it's worth running that kind of card. So it's just more important to me to pick like 2 or 3 random creatures that I really, or 2 important, not random, but important creatures that I want to include and target them with these kinds of spells. And then finally, we have the card that I revealed earlier, Treefolk Umbra. I like this one because of the totem armor, so I'm going to be able to generate the creature if the enchanted creature would be destroyed. I destroy the aura and keep the creature on the battlefield, which is nice. It gives +2/+0, and then the creature can assign combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. There are not a whole ton of creatures that this will be amazing for in this deck. A lot of creatures, like I say, are more like 1/1s or 2/2s, things like that. Like there's not a lot of creatures that are insanely tough compared to their power. But the one that actually it will go really well with is my commander. And there are a couple other cards, like I say, that would benefit from this. But in particular, my commander would be insane with this because it would actually have a lot more. Its power is like really low and its toughness is decent on the get-go. So giving this that is a really good boost. Okay, up next. Let's do the instants and sorceries. Hope I haven't been able to give you too many clues yet as to who the commander is. Although I have mentioned that it is Guy and that its toughness is greater than its power. But beyond that, I don't know if I've given too many clues yet, which I'm trying to avoid. So, up next, Bite Down. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. What I like about this is in particular is the planeswalker aspect. This deck, the one thing that it's going to struggle with is trying to eliminate planeswalkers from the battlefield. Simply because I expect people to throw their creatures in front of my creatures a lot. So, in order to block. And if they're going to be blocking with their creatures, then if I attack their planeswalker, they're going to want to block that too, I figure. So this allows me to just circumvent that if they happen to have something particularly troublesome on the battlefield. Next up, Season of Renewal. As you saw, I have a decent number of enchantments. The one in particular that I would want to target with this, and this is the reason why I included this card in particular, is that curse. If I can get that curse back after I kill off the player who I've initially cursed with it and put it on somebody else later in the game, that is highly beneficial to me, potentially. Especially if I can get it down to 1-on-1 and then do that. In addition, there are several creatures, as I've mentioned in this deck, that I would really like to be able to get back if they end up going to the graveyard. And as far as I can remember, this is the only card that lets me get stuff back out of the graveyard. So, it's pretty vital for that reason. Defend the Celestius. As I said, I want to be able to put +1/+1 counters on creatures. So this is one of those cards that I've included for that reason. I can target up to 3 creatures and give them each 1 counter, or I can give 1 creature all 3, or etc, etc. Mortal's Resolve, another card that I've included specifically to protect my commander or to protect one of the other 2 or 3 cards that are insanely valuable to this deck. I don't really care about the +1/+1 as much, but the Indestructible is what's really valuable to that. Gift of the Viper is one of my favorite cards, and I don't have a lot of copies of it, so basically if you ever see it in one of my decks, it's in there for a very special reason. And in this case, it's because I like the idea of giving counters to things, as I said. So I've got a reach counter here and a death touch counter here, in addition to the +1/+1 counter. So the creature that I target with this is going to get a lot of random counters, and it gets to untap. So I can use this as a defensive thing, or I can go on the offense with it. Either way, very valuable. And then Snakeskin Veil, another card in here specifically to protect a creature on the board. Potentially, like I say, there's a few that I've wanted to protect. Giving it hexproof means that if it's being targeted specifically, I can avoid that issue. The one downside to mono green is, of course, that it doesn't really have a lot of counter spells per se. It has some decent removal, but it doesn't have a lot of counter spells. So I felt like Snakeskin Veil and Mortal's Resolve in particular were very important to include to try and protect a couple creatures. And then the Gift of the Viper is just a nice one there. As I said, removal. Carnivorous Canopy destroys an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying. If that permanent's mana value is 3 or less, you get to proliferate. What I really like about this card is the proliferating thing. That's going to be very, very valuable in this deck later on. You'll see. But being able to remove any of these 3 things is also pretty solid, especially when green comes into consideration, because green is typically bad at dealing with flying. Pick Your Poison, another removal card that I really enjoy. What I like about this one is they have to choose what they're going to get rid of. So the goal of this card is to pick, say, enchantments when you want to get rid of an opponent's enchantment when they only have 1 on the board. So you're picking that because you know they'll have to sacrifice it, and then everybody else on the board will just have to sacrifice something that they don't necessarily like. What I also like about this card is it's very flavorful for this deck. As you'll see later on, it's like perfectly on point with the flavor that this deck is going for. Scale of Heights, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, you gain 2 life, you can play an additional land, and you draw a card, all for 3. This is probably one of the best cards I think I've ever seen at the common level, in my opinion. And I mean, some people might want to debate me on that. You'll notice I put the Carnivorous Canopy on the side. There's an important reason for that later, as you'll see. But this one here, I just think is too good not to include into any deck that uses green, in my opinion, if you have enough copies. Just the amount of stuff you're getting is amazing out of this card. Cultivate, 2 and a green. This is like one of the only ramp cards I have in my deck, unless you want to include that as a ramp. But it is pretty good to have this card, in my opinion, in this deck, just to pull those extra lands if you're not hitting them. So, of course, you get to search your library for up to 2 basic lands, put those, reveal them, put 1 into your hand, put the other on the battlefield tapped. Roar of Challenge. All creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. I have a couple creatures in here that I'm going to eventually be doing some stuff with that you'll see. And if I can play this in tandem with one of those, it becomes insanely fun. Also, that creature gains indestructible until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. As I say, a lot of my creatures don't have that coming in, but if I can get the +1/+1 counters on them fast enough, I will be able to do that without too much difficulty. And then I don't have to worry about trying to pick the appropriate creature necessarily. I can apply it to any creature. Noxious Assault. This is where you're going to start to get a hint of what I'm actually trying to do with this deck. 3 and 2 green, creatures you control have +2/+2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. This card in tandem with what I'm doing in this deck is basically like the closeout card. If I want to win the game by hitting everybody all at once and winning the game, this is the card to do it with. Insanely valuable in this deck. And then finally, Wormquake, which is the most expensive card in this deck, I think, if my memory serves. But it is also a really funny value card in this deck. Unfortunately, I do not actually have the worm. So I'm including a Phyrexian Horror token, which is the closest thing I could come up with. But basically, you get to create an XX green Phyrexian Worm creature token with Trample and Toxic 1, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. So you can cast it for 6 originally and flash it back for 10. Then for each opponent with 3 or more poison counters on them already, you get to make an extra worm. So basically, if you time this right, you could potentially make up to 4 of those creatures for 6 mana, and then later on for 10 mana. Crazy good card in this deck. So these two, like I say, are kind of like my closeout cards for this deck, and they're, as I say, I think they're the most expensive things in this deck. I don't think there's anything more expensive than those. I could be wrong. There might be one creature in here that's more expensive, but I really don't remember for sure there being one. Okay, so we're going to get into the creatures now, and you're going to notice that the creatures, actually there is one creature that's more expensive. That's right, I did forget that one. There's 2 piles of creatures that we're going to deal with. This is the theme pile, and this is the non-theme pile. So I'm going to go through the non-theme pile first, just because I don't know if I've given away the answer yet, but I know that the theme pile will definitely give away the answer. So, first off, we have a Web Spinner Cuff. I like this creature. 2 and a green to put a 1/4 into play. It has reach. And then you can also pay 4 to attach it to a creature you control, and that creature gets +1/+4 and reach instead. So I think that's very valuable in this deck, especially if you can combine it, say, with that enchantment that I showed you earlier, the Totem Armor one. If you can put both those onto one creature, that creature's toughness is going to be through the roof. It'll be +7 off the cuff. And then +6 off the cuff, in addition to whatever it has, and then it'll deal damage via its toughness rather than its power. So that'll make it really powerful. Kinkerbloom, pay 1, sacrifice this thing, and then you can destroy an artifact, enchantment, or you can proliferate. As I said, proliferating is kind of ideal in this deck, so that's why this one in particular is included. It's 1 and a green to put into play, and 3/2, so it's pretty powerful as well. Undergrowth Leopard, also 1 and a green to put into play, also 1 to sacrifice it, and you get to do an enchantment or an artifact. It's a 2/2, it's vigilant. So these are kind of my removal creatures. Next up, we have a couple creatures that actually give me trample, in addition to the few cards that I've already shown you. So if I can get these on the board, I can give my whole board trample, provided that there's a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. 1 and a green with kicker, 2 and a green in addition. So if you can pay 5, you get a creature with 2 +1/+1 counters on it and coming into play, making it a 4/4. And all your creatures with +1/+1 counters on it have trample. Dustshell Crawler does the same thing with regard to +1/+1 counters, but instead, when it comes into play, you just put a counter on target creature. And you could put it on this one, or you can put it on any other creature, but this one is a 0/3, so it really doesn't do anything unless you can add some power to it at some point. Sagu Pummeler. This one and the next card, what I like about them is the renewal abilities. So this is a 4/4 with reach for 3 and a green, which is kind of expensive, but as I say, what is really, really valuable about this is once it gets into the graveyard, you can pay 4 and a green, exile it, and then you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters and a reach counter onto a creature. So as I said, I want to put counters on things, as you'll see when we get to the special creature, which I'm going to actually put over here. And I'll reveal that one near the end too. Bannerhide Krushek does the same thing essentially as the Sagu Pummeler with regards, except it's called Scavenge instead of Renew. So I get to put +1/+1 counters on my creature that I am targeting, though, equal to the power of this creature rather than equal to a certain number. So this one will be 4 counters going on to that creature. I can also discard this thing by paying 1 and a green and then put 2 +1/+1 counters onto a creature. So if I don't want to put a 4/4 with trample into play for 3 and a green, I can put 2 +1/+1 counters on something, and then later on, I can put 4 counters onto something, and that's pretty insane in my opinion. Sabertooth Cobra is probably going to give away something to this aspect of the deck for sure. If it deals damage to a player, they get a poison counter. And then during their next upkeep, they have to pay 2 or they get an extra poison counter. Of course, if any player has 10 or more poison counters, they automatically lose the game. So you can see kind of what I'm doing with regards to proliferating and the poison counters. The question is, how am I going to get poison going in this deck? And you're going to see soon, I do have an answer to that. Noble Quarry, 2 and a green for a 1/1. All creatures able to block this thing do so. Or you can pay 5 and a green to put this as an enchantment onto a creature, and then that creature gets +1/+1, and all creatures must block it instead. What I love about Bestow, though, is if the creature that's enchanted with this dies, this thing turns into a creature and stays on the board. So you still actually have the creature ability afterwards. Golgari Decoy is one of those fun ones that I've included in here because all creatures able to block it do so. It's a 2/2 for 3 and a green, so it's expensive to put it on the battlefield. You can also scavenge it and put 2 +1/+1 counters onto a creature at the cost of 3 and 2 green. So again, it's very versatile in this deck. The sun has decided to rise above the bus, unfortunately, but I'm not going to move again. Predator Ooze is actually one of the key creatures in this deck that I kind of want to protect if I can. It already has Indestructible, so that's very solid. Whenever it attacks, I put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever a creature dealt damage by this thing dies, I put a +1/+1 counter on it. And so if I can get this thing, say, to be equipped with the enchantment that... what was it? Was it enchantment? I think it was an enchantment, wasn't it? That causes you to block everything. Or no, it was a spell. If I can play that spell that makes you block everything with this, then all those things will get damaged by the ooze, and the ooze won't die, which is nice. Scattershot Archer. Okay, so the enchantment, the Noble Quarry, that's also possible. There we go. Now I know what I'm talking about. Scattershot Archer. What I like about this one is if you can equip this one with, say, the Golgari Gorgon's Head that I showed you earlier. When you tap this one, it'll deal 1 damage to each creature with flying, and because of the death touch that is now on this thing when you do that, this thing will then kill all those flying creatures. So this guy is kind of like a sleeper card in this deck because he can do some insane stuff if I can get him to have death touch. Which there's also the Viper's gift in here specifically to target this card potentially as well for that reason. Defiler of Vigor's in here just to give a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters. It's a 6/6 with trample. It does cost a little bit to put into play, but as an additional cost, once this thing's on the board, you can pay 2 life and then reduce the green that you have to pay for any creature or any other spell per se. So it's going to reduce the effect of, or reduce the cost of a lot of spells in my deck if I'm willing to pay the life. And then whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So all my creatures are just going to get really buff via all the green stuff that I'm doing. Forgotten Ancient is another one that I want to definitely protect. Whenever anybody casts a spell, I can put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then at the beginning of my upkeep, I can move those +1/+1 counters to my other creatures. What I love about this is the fact that it says onto other creatures, so I can do more than one creature in a turn. I could put like 3 different counters onto 3 different creatures, which is pretty solid. And again, this just helps me. Both these creatures are in here essentially just to help me deal with, I want to get +1/+1 counters on my stuff to boost it a little more powerful, make it so that those creatures that I'm swinging with in the theme set can survive, because a lot of them are very weak. Next up, Suspicious Bookcase. As I said earlier, when I was showing the Rogue's Passage, there is another card in here, and this is it. If I pay 3, I can tap this, and then target creature can't be blocked this turn. So this, combined with the Rogue's Passage, will allow me to get 2 creatures through to deal combat damage per turn, if I wish, to pay the 7, which I think is fairly solid if I have the mana available. Venom Connoisseur, she's going to kind of give away the theme of this deck. Because whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, she gets Death Touch until end of turn. And then if it's the second time that this has happened, all my creatures will get Death Touch until end of turn. So I was saying earlier about the ooze, if I can get Death Touch onto the ooze and then swing with it, and I can get something onto it that says that all the creatures have to block it, then that ooze becomes the most deadly thing on the board, because essentially all creatures will have to hit it, and I can assign any of the combat damage or any of the power I have on it, 1 per, to each creature I want to kill off. So it's really kind of like a board wiping thing. And then finally we have the other board wiping thing that's in this deck, which is also insane. And it is Nakatal War Pride. So this is another one that, combined with the Venom Connoisseur, is just crazy. It must be blocked by exactly 1 creature if able. And then whenever you attack with this, you have to put X tokens into play tapped and attacking that are copies of this thing, where X is the number of creatures defending player controls. Then remove all the tokens from the play at the end of the game, end of the turn. So all the tokens that come into play are going to get removed from the game, which is fine. That's not the important part. If you can find some way to keep this thing on the board, say, again, we have a couple cards to give it indestructible or hexproof or whatever to protect it. If it can not die, if you can give it a lot of +1/+1 counters too, sure, whatever. Then when it swings, all the other creatures on somebody's board are going to basically get board wiped off, or at least get dealt damage. And if you can get this to do its thing while this is on the board, then it will actually give Death Touch to everything, provided that you haven't actually put a second creature into play, provided that you haven't played a second creature already during that turn. So crazy good combo there. Now, obviously, Death Touch is kind of a thing in this deck. So, which is why the Viridian Longbow is here. Because any of the creatures with Death Touch, I can basically tap them and deal 1 damage to a creature and kill it off. Or I can deal 1 damage to my opponent with this. Either way, pretty solid value. So that's why that's there. Speaking of Death Touch, that is the theme of this deck, as I said. So, Death Touch creatures. All green Death Touch creatures. We've got Tijuru Blightblade, Mirkwood Spider. I like this one in particular because it can give the creature that I put over here Death Touch each turn when it attacks. Dragon Sniper. This is probably one of the best Death Touch creatures out there right now. 1/1 Vigilance, Reach, and Death Touch is insane as a combo. Fang of Shigeki, 1 for a 1/1 with Death Touch. So as you're seeing, these are all 1-cost creatures with Death Touch, and then there's a lot of 2-cost creatures with Death Touch as well. Moss Viper, Flesh Burrower. This one's nice because whenever it attacks, another target creature you control gains Death Touch until end of turn. So it can apply it to that. It can apply it to the ooze. Underdark Basilisk, 1/2 with Death Touch. Thorn Wield Archer, Reach and Death Touch, 2/1. I'm not a huge fan of the flip there, but like I say, this deck doing all the +1/+1 counter nonsense will be hopefully enough to keep this on the board. Nightshade Dryad, this one in particular I like because it counts as a mana dork, and even though I don't really need the 1 mana of any color, it's obviously going to be green if I'm looking for a color. But the 1/2 with Death Touch is nice because I always have an extra mana available if I want, or I have a blocker. Toxic Scorpion, Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, a creature gets Death Touch until end of turn. I'm not overly particular fond of that per se, but it's just another low-cost one that I can put onto the board. Deadly Recluse, Reach and Death Touch, 1/2. Now we're starting to get into a couple of the higher cost ones, but again, like the whole mana curve of this deck is pretty solid. With the exception of the last 3 cards here, most of the creatures are every other creature in this deck. Every other creature in this deck has less than 4 mana value, pretty much. So that's awesome. Turn Timber. Oh, well, there's a few over here probably that I already forgotten about. Turn Timber Basilisk. Death Touch, 2/1. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can have target creature block this thing this turn if able. And then again, if we can boost its power, that's awesome. Axebane Ferox is probably one of my favorite ones in this deck. Death Touch, Haste, Ward, Collect for Evidence. That's always a really annoying one to do to an opponent. So if they want to target this thing with a spell or an ability, they have to actually remove something with mana value 4 or greater from their graveyard. They can do multiple cards to get to that mana value if they want to, but it's still an expensive trick. Treetop Snare Spinner, 3 and a green for a 1/4, reach, death touch. 2 and a green to put a +1/+1 counter on any creature you control at sorcery speed. This is another one that's a fantastic target for the Totem Armor card, because then it's going to be hitting for 6 automatically. Ornery Dialophosaur, 3 and a green for a 2/2 with death touch, and whenever it attacks, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it's also going to get +2/+2. So if you manage to get 2 +1/+1 counters onto this, then it's automatically just going to get +2/+2 every time it swings and become a 6/6. So that's pretty solid. Acidic Slime is actually probably one of my favorite cards in Magic that doesn't get used a lot. I actually used to include it in all my old decks when I originally started building decks a few years ago. And I've slowly phased it out of almost all of those decks, with the exception of maybe 2. And this is one of those because it has the death touch, it's a 2/2, and it gets me some destruction stuff. So I find it very valuable for this deck. Kura, the Boundless Sky, I like this one in particular. First off, hollow. Second off, full art. And then Flying Death Touch. When this thing dies, you get to pick one of the following. You can search your library for up to 3 lands, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. It does not say they have to be basics, so this one will actually let me search out for the Rogue's Passage if I haven't already gotten it. In addition, if I don't want to get the lands for whatever reason, if I'm land flooded, let's say, which is rare, but it might happen, then I can create an XX green spirit creature token, where X is the number of lands I already control. So if I'm land flooded, then I'm making a really powerful creature token. And if I can find a way to give that token death touch, then that's awesome. And then finally, the most expensive card in this deck is Hornet Queen. She is actually really low in terms of power, but what I love about her is when she comes into play, she gives you an army. So she is a 2/2 with flying and death touch, but when she enters the battlefield, you actually get to create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So you end up with 5 creatures for the cost of 7. And as you're going to see when we reveal the commander, if you haven't already guessed what it is, it's kind of solid to have that ability. To have all those extra bodies for a turn suddenly that an opponent was not expecting. You won't be able to swing the first turn that you do it, but I mean, they might not be able to build up enough forces to protect themselves when the time comes. So obviously, we are doing poison stuff in this deck. So that is the token that I was talking about that is sleeved. The other token that I didn't reveal yet was the insect with flying and death touch. And the hidden card that I wanted to talk about is Koisai Penitent Warlord. I actually built a commander deck around this before for Commander Core Creator Challenge, if I remember correctly. It wasn't the commander in that deck originally, and it's still not a commander in its own deck yet, but I think this is the perfect card for this deck for a number of reasons. One, it's a 0/5, so it has insane toughness already. Sorry, I just noticed that there's a hair in the sleeve, and I'm going to try and get it out if I can. Bear with me. Nope, that's not happening. Okay, well, I'll have to get it later with like a pin or something. That's just really aggravating. Can I put you in front of the hair at least? Okay, you can't really see it so much now. Anyways, what I love about this guy is, as I say, he's a 0/5 to kick it off. And then when he's enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on him. So he has to have all 3 of these things to make this work. But when he does, whenever he deals combat damage to an opponent, you can draw that many cards, and then he deals that much damage to each other opponent. So this card is insane when combined with my commander, who I'm sure you've guessed by now. Because if I can get this guy, say, enchanted with the Totem Armor card, and then I can equip him with the shield, and then I get him some +1/+1 counters. He ends up swinging for, let's say, 11 or 12 on the toughness scale, dealing that damage to the opponent, potentially, if I can, have the Rogue's Passage or the bookcase out. And then I get to draw that many cards, and he deals that much damage to everybody else as well. So this is kind of like the other closer card in my deck, I had the 2 sorceries that are kind of closing out cards. And this guy, if I can get him actually to do his trigger, is the third method of closing out the game without actually just going straight through combat, per se. And the reason why he is so valuable with that ability in this deck in particular is because my commander is, drumroll, I wonder if there's a drumroll sound effect that I can add to the video. Anyways, drumroll. It is Finn, the Fangbearer! Not that I'm sure you didn't have a clue by now. I'm sure you figured that out very easily if you play this game. And if you don't play this game, well, there's an explanation coming for you. So, Finn the Fangbearer is a 1 and a green for a 1/3. So, as I was saying, tougher than his power, just like this guy. He has Death Touch already built into him. And whenever another creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So, I don't think the extra damage he deals counts as combat damage, unfortunately. But he can essentially kill off one person if I can swing with him and he's stacked with all the stuff I just said. And I can get him to be unblocked. I can also give him that Gorgon's Head, or I can give him the plus the Death Touch counter via the Gift of the Viper, or there's those 3 other cards that give Death Touch to creatures. So if I can get the right combo of everything in play, this is a very convoluted combo deck, obviously, but if I can get the right combo pieces all into play and nobody messes with it, this thing swings. It deals, let's say, 12 damage. It deals the Death Touch damage, so it kills off the person who it hits. Oh, it only deals 2. Never mind. I just realized that doesn't work the way I thought it did the whole time. I mean, it's still going to deal a shit ton of damage, so it's still a fun card to include in this. But I definitely thought it got 2 poison counters, or it got poison counters based on the damage that it dealt. Oops. Oh well. The way this card, or this deck does work, though, is the basic way that I talked about with regards to building up a board full of really cheap creatures that all have Death Touch, swinging at people who can't block those creatures for whatever reason, and then just giving a whole ton of poison. That's the basic structure of this deck. But I mean, like I say, I've got the Kosai. He still does pretty cool stuff. And I've got a few other things in here that do some pretty cool stuff too. Anywho, when I actually put a title to this later on in brackets, I'm going to probably call it Son or Children of Ivy, I'm thinking. Because I like, because Poison Ivy is one of my favorite characters from Batman. I was originally thinking of calling it Revenge of the Green, but I think I'm going to make a different deck that I'm going to end up calling Revenge of the Green, which is going to be based around a lot of tree folk eventually. So, yeah. Anyways, for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Super Deck Monday. Monday. Much love to you all from Kaiba home and myself in the car. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.